Welcome to our presentation on assessing awareness and perception among population on environmental aspects. My name is Ioannis Giovos and I'm the Fisheries Director of IC, an environmental organization based in Thessaloniki, Greece. Together with my colleagues, we prepared this lesson that will present you the theoretical framework about the importance of assessing awareness and perception among population and the key role that can play in management, planning, and conservation. Moreover, we will provide you with information on how to assess environmental awareness and perception and examples that highlight the importance of such research for supporting conservation and advancing the implementation of awareness campaigns and environmental policies. All the examples that will be presented are based on the latest work of IC. Assessing awareness and perception is one of the most important aspects for advancing marine conservation. Individuals are the focus of such research, and they act depending on various factors such as beliefs, values, etc., which are highly influenced by their social contexts. History, culture, and other factors of the social context can be crucial drivers in shaping perception. Perception itself is a major factor for decision making, supporting or disapproving environmental policies. And this is why it's very important to understand and assess the perception of individuals or communities when new environmental policies are about to be applied. In this table, you can see different factors affecting the perception of individuals. As you can see, there are many different types of factors, the socio-demographic features, individual psychological characteristics, of course the knowledge, communication and information processing, interaction with the environment, how often this person or this community interacts with the local marine or environment in general, social processes, the social cohesion of a certain group and other factors, of course unexpected changes of governments and other factors, and of course the country, the culture, and specific aspects of a certain community. The level of influence of all these factors on shaping perceptions differs among individuals, communities, and countries. You will see later on some of the examples we will present you, how some of these factors affect the perception of individuals toward different environmental topics we discuss. But why is it important to assess environmental awareness and perception? Environmental awareness and perception shapes future expectations of individuals, has a crucial role in decision making, plays an important role in motivating behavior which affects the level of engagement of people on the implementation or the enforcement of environmental policies, guides stakeholder behavior during the management process, is a key factor that measures enforcement of different environmental policies, and of course, if neglected, creates a lack of commitment and non-compliance and conflict or failure of management plans. There are many different ways on how to assess environmental awareness and public perception. However, the most common is using questionnaires or public surveys. These questionnaires can follow a quantitative approach or a qualitative approach. Just to give you a brief example, quantitative approach is when you can measure the awareness of a person. You will see later on how we can use different behavioral scale for measuring awareness or perception. Qualitative approaches are other methods like open discussions with local community, which creates a picture of how different communities or different people see different environmental aspects, but it doesn't have a measurable outcome. These questionnaires can be designed with open form or closed form questions that explore ideas, assessing knowledge or attitudes. Open form questions are questions that the respondent can give any possible answer or write even a text, and is more used for qualitative approaches, while closed form questions have predefined answers and are most commonly used in quantitative approaches. Such surveys can take place in person, so one-to-one, taking an interview or responding a questionnaire, through telephone, calling different people and asking the questions of the questionnaires, completing questionnaire form, or via social media, online platforms with the questionnaire online distributed through social media. Of course, these different methods for conducting the surveys have certain advantages or disadvantages. For example, it's very easy through social media to get multiple responses through one respondent. There are some ways that you can exclude such phenomena. However, this is based on how you design your questionnaire and your survey. Now, a less applied technique for assessing environmental concepts or environmental awareness is content analysis. Content analysis is a research technique that is used to make replicate and validate inferences by interpreting and coding textual material, but not only textual. As you can see here, such approach can be used in social media posts, for example, or in mass press articles, or even is a qualitative approach to understand the perception of an individual towards an environmental topic. If you make someone write an essay about, let's say, climate change, then you process the text and you mark specific words, and this makes you understand the perception of this individual towards the issue of climate change. Another use of content analysis is to use kids' drawings. You set a specific topic, the kids or the students draw whatever they think is related to the topic that you gave them, and then you analyze this. You analyze the drawing, trying to make trying to have measurable outcomes. You will see an example later on. In all cases, it's important for assessing the perception to use a scale that will give you with a measurable outcome. One of the most common scales is the attitudinal scale of Kellert. It has all these different factors: naturalistic, ecologistic, humanistic, moralistic, scientific, aesthetic, utilitarian, and dominionistic, and of course negativistic. Creating a questionnaire using this scale helps you a lot, and you will see later on an example is coming right after this slide on how this scale can help you come up with measurable results about the perception of people towards environmental topics. However, it's mostly related to animals. So here comes the first example. The aim of our study was to assess the public perception towards cetaceans, to detect differences between dolphins and whales, and discover differences on the attitudes influenced by traditions and cultures that we discussed before. That is one of the factors affecting environmental perception. So the questionnaire distributed exclusively through social media and mass media, and it was translated in 22 languages to facilitate the uptake in many different countries. As you will see, as you can see in this map, these are the final results. So we had 5,230 responses, which makes this survey the biggest international survey regarding cetaceans. We had responses from 707 countries and 1,448 towns. Excuse me. Of course, as you can see in the map, the coverage is not global, and we are missing some countries, and of course we had to exclude some more due to the small number of responses. However, we got a very good sample. As I told you before, the technique you use to distribute and collect your questionnaires have different advantages and disadvantages. You can see here a disadvantage of social media. There are specific areas that lack internet connection, therefore it's impossible to get responses from these countries, and you can easily see that Africa is this example. However, there are also some countries like the whole Asia which are used a lot social media. However, they use different social media from the social media used in Europe or United States, and of course this also created a problem on getting more responses. So we have some responses from China, but we don't have as many as we would like to have. You can see that cluster B and cluster C is consisted of Portugal, Brazil, Norway, and Denmark. So, what is common between all these countries? Norway and Denmark are still whaling nations, although whaling is much more limited than in the past. And Brazil and Portugal quitted whaling in the 60s. However, still they have strong tradition, and their attitude towards cetaceans still is not positive as in all the other countries that whaling doesn't exist. So our findings from this work, we found that there is no difference in the attitude between dolphins and whales. We had a question about the captivity of cetaceans and if people approve or disapprove, and there was a universal disapproval of cetaceans in captivity. Only in Japan people were not against it. The majority of the respondents exhibited a positive attitude following a global trend of a rising appreciation for wildlife and cetaceans. Whaling nations and ex-whaling nations, until recently, all the ex-whaling nations already had a negative attitude towards cetaceans, still have a negative or neutral attitude towards cetaceans, and this reveals the importance of culture, heritage, and memory shaping attitudes, something that we discussed before. And in Western societies, the former utilitarian attitude of cetaceans, food items, clothing, in the past, cetaceans in most of the countries were either a food source or were used for different purposes. This utilitarian perception, is currently declining, and the concept of animal welfare and ethical animal treatment is on the rise. Now I'm gonna move to a next example. Here is a work we did last year on the misconception of the pufferfish consumption in Greece. Pufferfish is a toxic species of fish that invaded the Mediterranean back in the 20s. There are about 7 species currently. One is native and is not toxic. However, based on the EU regulation, the the consumption or marketing these species is forbidden. However, although these species have been around for a long time, we've noticed through our interaction with the fishing community that still there are people believing that such fish can be consumed, and this is coming due to the famous fugu plate in Japan that they use pufferfish sliced in a very specific way. However, this species is not the same as the pufferfish used in Japan. So fishermen through social media or so, they're coming in contact with the fugu culture, and they believe that they can utilize Lagocephalus by exporting it to Japan or consuming it locally as fungu. So, and there is a very big discussion because these species are extremely toxic, the species that we have in the Mediterranean. So people can die by eating such fish. So what we did is that we selected specific Facebook groups of the targeted groups, so people that might have the chance to see or fish or consume a pufferfish, and we tried to assess their knowledge on the toxicity of Lagocephalus by performing content analysis in the posts and the comments that we saw in posts related to Lagocephalus. So we selected these groups. We have a group of divers, fishermen, our group on citizen science and alien species, and another group on fishing. So the first fishing group was spear fishing group, and the last one was fishing from shore or from boat, trying to somehow cover all different aspects of fishing. So you can see here we have a post on Lagocephalus. This is a Lagocephalus, and this post says that Lagocephalus is a very dangerous and toxic fish that must not be consumed. It says that in Japan, people eat this fish and it's like a gourmet plate. And yes, I mean, through this post, we can understand that this person believes that Lagocephalus is a gourmet plate that, although is toxic, in Japan they consume, which is not true, it's a different species. And then we analyzed also the comments under this post and under every post, trying to understand how many people believe, of the percentage of people that believe that Lagocephalus still can be consumed, although it's toxic. We analyzed 140 posts and all the comments in all these 140 posts, and we come up with this result. So 24% of all the assessed posts and comments, which were about 1,000, believe that Lagocephalus is edible and can be consumed when it's treated properly, so as a fungu plate. And 100% of these 24% was recreational fishers, which makes it very dangerous because these people might even try, and this can result in the death of someone that tries to do this thing. So to understand how important it is to assess perception and how these can guide us to create custom tailored environmental awareness campaigns or influence policies, what we did after was, together with entities from all over the Mediterranean, to create a common press release explaining what's wrong with Lagocephalus, so that the species is toxic, And also we provided all the details and the links to the Ministry of Japan, showing that the species that we have in the Mediterranean is not the same as they consume in Japan. So this research we did on the perception guide us to create an awareness campaign, and we created the hashtag, and we try to communicate this as much as possible in order to make fishers in the Mediterranean to understand that this species is not edible. So here comes the next example that is coming through a Coast Action, a European project, the Oceans Past platform. So what we did for this work was to analyze the drawings of children of the first and the second primary school to understand how they perceive the marine environment. So we pose a question: what would you like to see underwater when you go swimming? And we instruct the teachers to keep them separately so they don't communicate, and they had to draw what they would like to see. And we come up with different drawings. Some of the drawing So we used again the utilitarian, the attitudinal scale of Kellert, and here you have some examples. We analyzed 125 drawings from Greece, South Africa, Spain, Ukraine, and UK. Later on, we got some from Italy as well. 95 of the children of the respondents, we could say, they depicted divers, snorkeling, and swimming activities, and this was in South Africa primarily, which they have a very strong industry, diving industry, while 5% of the kids depicted fishers. This provides a more utilitarian attitude because they consider the marine environment as a pool for extracting something that is useful to eat. And as you can see here, we did a specific focus on Greece and South Africa. So in Greece, kids provided us with more complex marine environments. You can see jellyfish in the first drawing, hippocampus, dolphin, corals, while in South Africa we're more simple. So this is a big fish and a diver. However, in South Africa, they had far more apex predators. You can see a shark and a whale, while in Greece there was an absence of apex predators. We had dolphins from time to time, but mostly were about fish, algae, jellyfish, and octopus were very popular. So this is another way using content analysis in a, let's say, unconventional way, which actually gives important insights for children that for them normally answering questionnaires create a stress. And of course, with this method, you can break the linguistic barriers. In the questionnaire we had with cetaceans, we could translate it in 22 languages. We had this chance, but let's say if someone doesn't have this chance, can use drawings. That it doesn't matter which language. You just have to translate the statement. So I would like to thank you a lot for following this presentation. You can see here bibliography that was referred during the presentation. I will be at your disposal if you would like to ask more questions or, I don't know, just interact with us through Canvas, and we'll be happy to answer all your questions or provide you further information. And thank you a lot. This is a drawing from South Africa. Thanks again.